ability to sharpen tools, chisels, planes, draw knives, knives is something that I would deem an essential skill. And it's something that you can pick up the products now for relatively cheap and have them around and start working on developing these skills. You'll see lately that I'm really focusing on using the older tools, kind of going back 100 years ago with construction techniques and tools. And the reason being is I do find it interesting. I like to be able to have those skills and develop those skills, but many times I get hundreds of comments from guys when I'm doing the timber frame project. Well, why don't you just use a router? Why don't you just use a belt sander? Or why don't you just use an electric saw for that? And the reason being is, yeah, I have access to all those tools. I have the majority of those tools here in my shop. But if you're living off grid, if you're living in a WROL situation, you're not going to have access to those tools any longer. What good does it do to have the best router, the best skill saw, the best sawzall, all of these things when you don't have the power to run them? So you can essentially do what I've done in this cabin building project with a basic set of hand tools like I've been demonstrating. You can go out, you can fall timber, and you can build a pretty nice little cabin. And that's why I'm focusing on those skills, so I have those if I need to rely upon them in the future. Not to mention it's just a very fun project to do. But one thing that's very important is sharp tools. If you're going to use these old tools, a sharp tool is essential, and they're not going to stay that way, so you're going to need to be able to have these skills. So what I've got laid out here is a few different options. Most of you around are pretty much familiar with these square type of stones. These are a little bit different here. These are Japanese water stones, but you'll see typically square stones with this gray compound. Oftentimes they're two-sided, a coarse and a fine. You can buy these at Home Depot. And these are great. These are that's not a bad option to go with. However, they're difficult to handle. You're looking at two different ways of sharpening. You're either bringing a tool to the stone, like for example sharpening a knife. This is an ideal way to do it. But if you have a larger tool like one of these chisels, or for example an axe or a hatchet or an Oz, it's just not very realistic. It just actually doesn't work very well to bring a large tool to a stone like this. What's a better option is to have a smaller stone that you can bring to the tool itself. And that's what we're going to be concentrating on. Now, I just laid these out as an example. We're not going to be using Japanese water stones today. Japanese water stones are not to be used with oil, but the stones that I'm going to demonstrate today are. These typical stones, these abrasives like the Lansky stone, and I don't know the manufacturer of this one. Just as a side note, when I want to learn to do something, I don't really rely upon the advertiser's spiel or their brochures. What I typically do, if I need to get a welder or a plasma cutter, I go to a guy who uses it every day. I go to a shop and I talk to the guy that actually makes his living with it. And I say, hey, what should I look at? This is what I'm doing. What would you recommend? Whether that be a grinder, I'll go to a guy who uses them. Do I want this? Do I want that? What do you find lasts the longest? I go talk to people that actually do it. So when I decided to get set up to sharpen chisels and hand tools, I went to a guy who does it for a living. There's a guy up in Portland who has a really great shop. He's kind of renowned for being able to sharpen anything. He does saw blades, rip saws, he does old antique tools. He's very good at it. So I went up and talked to him. And he was very kind and gracious, and he took me into his shop. And I dropped off my chisels and I said, can you show me, what's the best way to do this? Can you teach me how to do this? And it was very kind of him. He spent a half hour with me. He showed me the process. And what he uses is this big round stone right here. Now, I've demonstrated these in the past. I've had this little Lansky stone, which is great for a pack stone, but it's actually a little bit small. You can see the surface area difference. This is probably 2.5 inches, where this here is 4 inches, and you have a coarse and a fine. And this is what he used to hone and to sharpen, to really finish off hand tools and chisels, like planer blades and chisels. He had a big stack of them there, so I asked him if I could buy one, and so he sold me one for $7 because I'd never seen one this big before. but I just went online, and I'll put the link here in annotation. I found a place where you can buy essentially the same thing for about $20. I've seen them from $15 to $20, but this is what you want here. A nice big 4-inch, two-sided, a coarse and a fine oil stone. Now I talked to him about different oils to use. In regard to oils, what his take was to use the oils that a lot of these stone manufacturers recommend. One, they're expensive, and they have a tendency to gum up the stone. They don't work really well of cleaning the material out of the stone that you're removing from the blade. What he uses is diesel or kerosene. Diesel or kerosene has a really great solvent property to it, and it actually really works well, and that's what he used for all of his cutting stones, and so who am I to argue with him? So I just got an old bottle here and put a little diesel in there. Diesel and kerosene are close enough where you could probably use either one, and it does work really well. It keeps the stone clean, and you can really feel it down in there cutting well. So what I'll typically do here is I'll just drip a little bit on here, smear it around. And then I'll hold the chisel in here really tight, and you see you've got a nice bevel on here. The tools, the nicer tools will actually tell you what the bevel is, but that doesn't really make any difference to us because we're going to just match it up. So I'll put it on here like this, and just in a nice circular motion, and what I found really helps is to keep your finger, your index finger, pressing right over the plane of the blade right there. So you'll feel it start to cut. And it's very important to go slow until you can get the confidence and the skill to really hold that on a flat plane like that. Just go round and round and do this for approximately 30 seconds or so. What you'll find when you really start doing some precision honing like this, you'll find that your factory tools, even expensive ones like this, don't come all that true from the factory. And the coarse side of the stone is really going to highlight, and I'll demonstrate what I mean. So after you do this, depending on what condition the blade is in, then you'll flip over to the back side here, and we'll hone this. Same amount of time. Once again, this is using the coarse side. Now I'm not going to spend the time that I would normally on this because it's already sharp, and I just want to demonstrate to you. Once we have that done, you'll see, you won't be able to see on this camera, but you'll see the swirl marks and you'll see the high marks because they'll be a little higher, have a little higher polish on them. Over time, you will actually bring this down, and as long as your stone is true, they'll be brought down very flat and it'll cut even better. So once we finish with the coarse side, we'll just put a little bit of kerosene or diesel here on our fine side and just repeat the whole process. Get that index finger pushing right on the plane of the blade. The oil, I noticed, has a real slippery feel to it when you're honing. And what I can really tell with the diesel is it really is getting down in there and doing some good. I like the feel. It seems like it cuts a lot better with the kerosene or diesel. Same process. We'll flip it over and we'll work the back side. If you can see, if I can get the light right, you can see right here, this is a really fine stone on the fine side. It's actually, if you continue to do this, you'll get a mirror polish on here. And you can see that this corner right here is actually taking a real high polish. And what that's telling me is that there's a high spot right here. Even a fine precision ground chisel like this is not perfectly flat and not true. And right here we can see a valley where it's dark. And given enough time, I'm not going to worry about that right now, but as I sharpen and hone each day, I use it, given enough time, we'll bring that down and have a really, really nice edge. A stone like this, you're not just limited to chisels. anything with a beveled blade you're going to be able to sharpen. Another good example is the blade for your block plane right here. As you can see, you have essentially the same style of chisel cut right here. 25 degrees on chisels, 25 degrees on block planes, but same process. And depending on the tool, this is a little bit smaller. This actually might work better. Just pressing that flat. Line up that angle and just work that round and round. And flip over to the back side. And it will just be shaving sharp. This particular stone has the sharp edges on it. This is going to be a little more fragile. This I would consider to be a shop stone, because if you throw this in a toolbox or in a truck, these are going to break off and crack. The nice thing about the little portable stones like the Landskis is they have this bevel on them, and they make them a lot more durable. Plus they're a lot lighter to pack, but it's essentially the same thing. I can take my axe here, my splitting maul, and the nice thing is I can sight down it, and I can really put a nice edge on my tools. Shovels, hoes, anything. There's just no limit to it. I even sharpen my draw knife with these stones. You lay it there. You can really have control over what you're doing. Much more difficult to sharpen with a big square stone on larger tools than the round stones. I just really prefer it. But that's essentially it. You just don't really need any more than that. Like I said before, this is for honing. This is for touching up. This is for tools that are maintained well and kept sharp. This is not ideal for bringing them back, something that's damaged. But once it is brought back, if you touch these tools up before you put them away or before you start, they'll stay sharp and they'll last a long time. And these can be really used well with knives. I like this one, especially for sharpening knives. I have good control here. Just a great product, and for $20, it's something you should have 2 or 3 of them around. It's a very good skill to have. So that's it for the sharpening video, and I appreciate you guys watching. We'll have some more timber framing coming up soon, and I'll see you in the next one.